Okay, let's do it. Um, okay, so Lord of the Rings versus Star Wars. You can decide if you're looking for which one is better or which one is like, I guess maybe you just want to pit them against each other and just see how it plays out. But why don't let's just start with which one is better. Which one is actually better, Lord of the Rings or Star Wars?
Okay, wait. The first clarifying question is, what are we counting as Lord of the Rings and Star Wars? Because is it Lord of the Rings or is it also including
Rings of
The
Power.
Hobbit and Rings of Power? Is it Star Wars episodes 4 through 6 or is it 1 through 9 plus all the shows? You know what I mean?
I think the purist in me wants to say it's just like the 3 Lord of the Rings films and like probably the 6-ish.
Oh,
The prequels and the original trilogy, but I think we have to take all of it from all of them.
You want to take all
Really?
of it?
I do. Because they both like slowly got worse, but
Yeah.
maybe one of them got way worse than the other got worse is what I'm looking for. So I mean like
Dude.
the Disney series and all that stuff.
Oh,
dude, unquestionably, Star Wars got way, way worse than anything Lord of the Rings related.
well, okay. So if we're gonna go off that, I think that's just because they had way more at bats, and to follow that metaphor, they struck out way more times. Worse than struck out, they like swung and then threw the bat into their own dugout,
The
and it hit
Empire
everybody on
struck
their
out.
team.
Yeah. Yeah, I think okay, then is that a bad way of asking then? Maybe we just do the OGs. Maybe that'll make you feel better.
I think that's easier to look at. Plus, I watched 15 minutes of Rings of Power. I tried, and so I'm not at any I have no real information and evidence or experience to base an opinion off of, other than the fact that I watched 15 minutes of Rings of Power and I thought, this is garbage. It's filled with the most crappy one-lines attempts that I've ever heard, and it's bastardizing all the characters. And then I also stopped watching all the new Star Wars stuff too.
That's true. You're not really qualified to talk about that. Let's do the OGs versus the OGs.
So we're talking the 3 Lord of the Rings movies. The 3 Lord of the Rings movies versus the original trilogy, and that's it.
Yes.
Down. Yes.
Okay. All right.
That
Go
works.
ahead,
Because or we could do the Lord of the Rings trilogy plus the Hobbit trilogy and the original Star Wars trilogy and the prequels.
I don't like that. I don't like the Hobbit being included because I hate the Hobbit.
I like it. See, so like, I mean, I'm kind of down for that
let's
too.
do that. Yeah, let's do that. The 2 trilogies from each are included.
Okay. So here's my opinion on this. I think that Star Wars is a better movie series overall because they didn't have source material that's from a book. So, because a lot of the groundwork was already done as a book on The Lord of the Rings. So they had, a really good plot to go off of. There's a lot more mythology that they could dive in. Like, there was a whole bunch of world building they already were able to spin the movies off of and reference, plus a cartoon from the 1970s, whereas Star Wars was just a movie, and for as well as it's done, that's pretty incredible. That's why I think Star Wars would be number 1.
Wow. Okay.
As a
one
movie.
for Star Wars, as a movie. Okay. Okay, Corey.
Okay.
Just chewing on it.
This is not just to play devil's advocate. I actually do believe this, and it hurts me to say it, but I think that Lord of the Rings is like unquestionably way better. I think the original Lord of the Rings movies are like perfectly executed. I think it's a good point actually about bringing up the books and the source material. I do think it's very impressive that George Lucas came up with the manuscript, and actually I've been reading a book about the makings of the original trilogy, and it's like all this behind the scenes content and quotes from George and a bunch of other like writers and producers and even the other directors in the future or the last 2 movies about the movies and the making of the movies. So I think that's super impressive. But if I think about like, for one, Lord of the Rings as a story, I think is so timeless. And maybe it's because it's more in like the fantasy genre. It just feels like the most timeless story of all time, maybe besides like biblical content, because it's a tale of good versus evil, and there kind of isn't any gray area or question of like, exceptions or things like that. It's just so pure in that, right? I also really love the characters because it's one of the first movies and series where it's not just about one person. It's this like, what's it called? Like this band of brothers or this band of, misfit people that all come together. And yeah, Frodo's kind of the main guy, but you end up loving everybody in their own route for different reasons. I think Aragorn is also really interesting because he's actually kind of the main character if you think about it. And he's also this perfect picture of masculinity that like is very overlooked. And the CGI, like it's crazy that Lord of the Rings was made in like the early 2000s. Yeah, and it looks phenomenal.
Yeah.
I think Star Wars actually holds up really, really well for being made in the 70s and early 80s, but not nearly as well.
I think that's actually one of the more impressive parts about Star Wars is that they didn't have, like, there's hardly any CGI specifically in the original trilogy, there's zero. Like when they first got shipped to theaters, and the model making, but Lord of the Rings did that too. Like that's one of the big differences between the original Lord of the Rings trilogy and the Hobbit trilogy is, I just watched The Fellowship of the Ring on, I think it was New Year's Day, all the way through. And the Uruk-hai are like so
good.
badass.
Oh, dude,
like all the armor, actually I had a podcast idea, or not a podcast idea, but a newsletter specifically around the framing of shots in Lord of the Rings, because there's this really interesting technique that they do where it's like they have focus on people, but then they always cut to this abstract shot. Like the one that I think of always is there's the when the hobbits are at Weathertop and they're being surrounded by the Nazgul, there's the scene where it goes to the hobbits' faces and then it cuts immediately to a ringwraith's armored hands, but they're like zoomed in super close, so it becomes this like abstract piece of art. That's like so the shots and the framing around it are amazing. And this is, don't get me wrong, it's a hard decision to like pick which one is better, and a really good argument could be made for either one. I think that as a movie only, Star Wars wins because it was not a book first. Which one do I think is? That's why it wins, because it was made purely for the screen.
I see.
And
okay.
I think that that fact is like, well, that's a pretty substantial feat, going from nothing to screenplay and then being able to follow like the archetype of the hero so well throughout it. And it's also a pretty archetypal myth of like, resurrecting your father through being a better version of yourself, and then saving so many other people. Like that's a timeless tale as well. If we're going to go all the way back to like the oldest story we have, which is Tiamat and the other Mesopotamian, like the father figure that correlates to her. You know which one I'm talking about?
I don't know those.
It's like Jordan Peterson talks about it all the time, and I'm sad that I don't remember who it is. But Absu, so it's like, the demon of chaos, Tiamat, her husband Absu dies, and then his children feed on his corpse, and then there's one child that rises above, Marduk, who is the one he's a king that is, his entire face is eyes, so he can see everywhere, and that's like he can see around corners, and he ends up bringing his father back to life from the evil siblings of his that are gnawing on it and living on his corpse.
It's just like Star Wars.
Interesting. Yeah, just
it
like
is though, because the Empire is like, they're feeding off Darth Vader's corpse and like his power. The Emperor is a leech, and he takes someone who should have been a force for good, turns him evil, and then Luke brings him back because he brings his father out of the depths, then
I see.
And then everybody else is saved because of it.
I think we can all agree that both Star Wars and Lord of the Rings have like a bunch of like super deep storytelling, like, and connections to a bunch of stories that are like deeper than even the story can explain. But here's why Lord of the Rings is the best one. Okay. Zach, you okay?
Go ahead.
It's 2
I'm
versus
ready.
1 now.
Look,
Okay.
look, dude. Like I said, you can make an argument for both. I think as a story, Lord of the Rings is better as a movie. And if we're taking the totality of it being a better movie, then Star Wars wins solely for the reason that it's not based on source material. Please continue.
I think that both stories have a really like good world building. Like the characters feel like they're in a world that's like 10 to a million times bigger than themselves. Like it's like so much larger, and there's all these other planets or lands far away, or you can sail off into, you know, what are the Grey Havens or whatever. You know, there's all these different like exterior places that are so big and far away, but they're like super important in their small little world. But what makes Lord of the Rings better is the characters, the character depth. I know that Star Wars has great characters, and the, you know, Darth Vader and Luke and all those are all very good like character development things, but I think it's almost like it's a different world, and the sci-fi of it made it a little bit more like these people are like fun and kind of like a little bit grimy, and like they, you know, they were at the bar and they sliced off someone's arm with a thing, you know, like it was very like, I don't know, a little bit more ragtag. Whereas in Lord of the Rings, they're like they all feel like they have this like really intense purpose right at the deep depths of themselves. And they're all a little bit different. Some of them are the same, but they're like, their entire character comes from that purpose, versus like Han's purpose is like, he wants to make money. Like that was kind of where it all started, you know, which, I mean, I guess you could say there's something like that in the Lord of the Rings characters, but they're like the character development and the interplay of all the characters and how they interact with one another is like, it's pretty unmatched with like Frodo and Sam. Go ahead.
They definitely just stay better versions of themselves. I'll say that. Like there's not, well, that's not true. Actually, Frodo has a pretty unique, like
intense
rise, fall. Yeah. A pretty intense drop. And then a really significant rise on top of that. But everybody else, like Merry, Pippin, Aragorn, Legolas doesn't really change at all. He's just awesome, like throughout the entire movie. And same thing with Gimli too. Maybe the only thing that he changed with him is hubris.
Yeah.
You know, being okay with being tossed for the benefit of winning a battle.
Okay. What's the worst piece of Star Wars media?
The worst one
Uh-huh.
that I've seen or that I know exists.
Yeah.
I think you have to have seen it. What's the worst one you've seen?
Easily The Last Jedi. 100%. Without a doubt. 100%. The Last Jedi. It's the worst piece of Star Wars I've ever seen and will ever exist, solely for the reason that there's so much stupid plot lines and weird things that come into it. And then that is the one where they totally ruined all the other characters from the previous trilogy. All of them got wrecked in that movie.
Wait, is The Last Jedi, what number is that in the series?
8.
That's number 8.
Oh, 8. Oh, right.
There's The Force Awakens, Last Jedi, and then Return of the
Rise of
Sith.
Skywalker.
Okay. I don't know. They're all
Return of the
same. They all sound the same.
You combined Return of the Jedi, Revenge of the Sith, and Rise of Skywalker.
Oh, yeah, all in one.
All in one.
I mean, isn't that confusing? Like, of course I did that. They all sound the same.
I was going to say The Acolyte because I think it's atrocious. But for the budget and the scale and the significance that it should have had, whatever episode 9 is, the somehow Palpatine returned line is just the most atrocious piece of storytelling of all time. And
the pacing of that
alone,
movie, the pacing of that movie is so bad. If you try to watch it, you're like, dude, it's so fast. There's no breaks.
Yeah.
There are some ways that would appear unnatural to others. It's like, oh, no shit, really? That's awesome.
20 years
Congratulations.
of lore and story.
How did he come back to life?
bad.
By being off screen for 20 years. That's how.
So stupid, man.
Yeah,
Pisses
I
me
concur.
off.
I haven't seen Acolyte, so I can't say it's the worst one, but I really didn't
I
like Kenobi, so
mm, that's
not a
also
big fan of Kenobi.
also up there. Okay. Conversely, what's the best piece of Star Wars material?
Mm. I really like Andor and Rogue One, but I think Andor even more. I think it's the best story and like produced media that Star Wars has created, because regardless of if it's Star Wars or not, it's great. Like if you didn't know that it was Star Wars, you'd be like, this is a fantastic show and story and characters and world. But because it's Star Wars, I think it makes it like better. But independently, it's probably the best thing that they've made.
Knights of the Old Republic, the video game,
Oh, dude. Oh, my
Oh,
gosh.
shoot.
is a
All right.
great game.
Wait, number 1 or number 2?
Number 2. It's
Yeah,
good number 2.
dude.
Yeah.
I was obsessed with that game.
Yeah,
I
it's amazing.
literally,
It's like making your childhood dreams come true.
yeah. I don't think I've ever been more obsessed with something than that game.
It's so good. No, I would. Okay, if I
d-
actually have to pick something, I would pick. I like Revenge of the Sith. It's just so.
Yeah,
it was
that's a
like
close
peak
second.
of the prequels and the like lightsaber duels, and it was just so.
Oh, dude.
As a 10-year-old watching that, I think I just watched it every day for like
Yeah.
a year, and it felt so good to do that. So, Zach.
I think it holds up really well.
Empire, all the way.
That's what it should be.
110%.
That's what the answer
Empire.
should be.
Classic.
Empire is the best Star Wars movie, hands down. Because
Yeah.
they finally got a real director in it with Irving Kershner, and it's the most fun to follow along with, because you have the split between Luke and Han and Leia, and the biggest Mac Daddy reveal of all reveals in one line ever. And if you watch that movie with like really good headphones or a really good sound system, the sound effects for everything are fantastic. Especially all the doors, the blasters. I think that lightsaber, that's like that. The lightsaber fight between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader doesn't really count as like the first lightsaber fight, because you don't see a whole lot of it. But that's also my favorite one, because you learn, like if you watch it from a learned perspective, knowing that Darth Vader is not actually trying to kill Luke Skywalker, he's just testing him to see what he's capable of doing. Then you go, oh my gosh, this is one of the coolest things ever, because Darth Vader's not even trying, he's just seeing what can happen.
Changes everything.
So it changes everything. Like it's literally a father playing with his son to see what he can actually do. Like, hey kid, how fast can I throw this ball, and can you catch it? And then can you throw it back fast enough so that I have to worry about it not hitting my face?
Feel that. Well, that was a delicious appetizer. I think it's time for the entree.
Can I add one more
Let's talk
note?
about something more boring. Yeah. No, okay. Go ahead, Corey.
One more note is just, I have to just make a shout out too for Lord of the Rings on the world building, because I just went down this rabbit hole over the break. I've been going down it for a couple months, but I decided to really like sink my teeth into it over the break on making your own language and creating a artificial language.
You're such a
And,
nerd.
Yeah, I know. It's horrible. I watched hours and hours and
I
hours of
love it.
YouTube videos. I read all sorts of things. I used all sorts of tools. And then I realized like, oh, AI can do, like ChatGPT can do 90%, 99% of this probably, as long as you follow the process. So I spent pretty much all of last Friday just making a language. I call it Vitazi is what I
It was a work day.
decided on.
Vitazi?
Yeah.
Is it
Yeah,
Italian
workday.
where two Z's? It's like Vitazzi or
No,
Vitazi?
just one Z. It's very, very simple, simplistic. It's pretty much, it's just like a practice. It doesn't have a huge vocabulary or anything, but going through that process gave me a huge appreciation for Tolkien, because Tolkien was kind of one of the OGs. In fact, he might have been the OG on creating your own language. It's called a conlang, a constructed language. And not only did he do one, but he did, I believe, 3 or even 4, because there's Elvish, there's Sindarin, there's Black Speech,
Mhm.
and I feel like there's another Elvish one,
and Dwarvish.
Yeah,
too,
yeah,
right?
I think you're right.
Spanish.
And
He
also
did Spanish
Dwarvish.
too. He came with Spanish, I think.
So, stupid.
That's Tolkien, right?
Aragon,
yeah,
vamos.
absolutely. That's what Gandalf said.
Yeah. Well, Gandalf would say something like, "Oh, mis pequitos hobitos."
What is Spanish for "flee, you fools"?
Well, he says "fly," you fools.
Oh, he
Yeah,
says
get it
"fly,"
right.
doesn't he?
I don't know how to say "fly" in Spanish.
Fly.
How do you say boil him, mash him, stick him in a stew?
Me.
Don't even try.
No also.
Okay, but you have respect for him because he writes languages. Keep going.
That's really it. Like, as far as like world building, I feel like that really set the stage for so many other things. Like, later with Star Trek, you have
Klingon.
you have what's it called?
Klingon.
Help me out. Klingon. Game of Thrones, you have Dothraki. Avatar, you have Na'vi. There's so many others now that have been created. But like, it's crazy that he did it way back when, in like the 20s or whatever it was. And that was a critical part of like the material. It's not just like this whimsical thing, or like, it really does add a lot more depth to the movie and the story and the world.
I agree.
I concur. We all agree.
Those are all wonderful things. Aragon nonetheless.
Okay.
I can't believe
Okay.
you wrote a language. Can you speak a little bit of your language, Corey?
No, I'm not even close. I'd have to like
Is it
look up everything.
speakable?
Yeah, it's super speakable. I mean, I wrote a whole blog post if you want to look at it.
I
But
don't.
my whole goal was basically to fix all the problems I've found with other languages. So everything is very simple and logical and phonetic, and it's supposed to feel very intuitive and like flow off your tongue. That's why most things are like a consonant vowel, and you just keep combining consonant vowel pieces together.
I love the idea that humans have been talking for all of human history, and Corey's like, I'll fix it. Like, I'm the guy to do it. Like, it's
Y'all
all
did it
been
wrong.
wrong.
I could do it better.
It's like, let me make a good one. Hold on. Like, he's got it. That
Yeah.
is so good.
I have faith.
Okay.
I'm fully aware.
We'll all be speaking Vitazi
Yeah.
later.
But that
If not, what's the language in Dune? The
Oh.
Oh, I don't know.
I don't
What,
remember.
the worms speak.
worm speak.
Not the
What language
worms.
do they speak in Dune?
The Fremen. What
Oh.
Fremen?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
We'll figure it out later.